Hey, everybody. Kendra Valentine back again to do episode 2 of my Embodied Badass podcast. Um, let's see, before we dive in, one, I want to give a blanket trigger warning. As I said last week, and as I will say every week moving forward, this podcast is not appropriate, probably, period. But also, this podcast is definitely not appropriate for somebody under 18 years old or anyone who is in a place of getting triggered by talking about either sex or drug use or abuse. These are all things that I'm going to be unpacking over the coming weeks. It's my journey through healing, and it has not been a journey that has been in nice, neat little piles. And so here's what I want to say. Super important for me to say this. If you are somebody who does not feel like they can swim in that pool, please, by all means, take care of you. I'm going to ask you to take care of you and just keep it moving. This is probably not the podcast for you. And P.S. self-care is crazy sexy. So, like, be sexy as fuck and keep it moving. It's okay if it's not for you. Because it is not edited for lifetime television at all. Every now and again, you might see my lighting because I move my head a lot. So, like, you're welcome, I guess. I'm just out here raw dogging this. Um, One of these days, I'll get a professional, producer to put all this together. But for the moment, it's me and a couple people that love me and I love them. So anyway, last week we talked about, or I talked about this situationship that I had gotten into briefly, which I laugh about now, but really there's very little bit that was funny about it. Okay, there was a little bit that was funny about it, but it really, what it did for me is it opened up this vortex of considering of like, why, after all these years, after all this healing, after all, water, after all of the things that I've done to get myself into what I feel is good alignment with myself, why would I have reverted back to behavior that doesn't feel good for me, period? Like, even if it feels good in a moment, it doesn't feel good overall. And so I started thinking about like unpacking that further. And what I came to was that I think it's a really good segue into the episode that I was going to start this podcast with, and that's talking about my early teen years. Um, and so I'm going to jump right in there and talk about that. And also, just really quick, one more time for those in the back who didn't hear it, trigger warning, because we're going to be talking about some stuff today. So I'll give you 3, 2, 1. Okay, so anyone who's still here, I was a hot 13 years old when I lost my virginity. I lost it in a threesome, by the by. And although I smile, like, and I don't hesitate in saying that, I recognize how, I guess, how profoundly sad that is. And when I start to unpack, why would a 13-year-old have sex, first of all, like, period? And why would a 13-year-old lose their virginity in a threesome? Like, oh my God, you can't talk about that stuff. Like, oh, you're this, or you're loose, or you're a slut, or, right? And that is the question. Why would a 13-year-old choose to lose their virginity in that fashion? And so, and I think, the people pleasing root that showed itself in this last situationship kind of holds some of those answers from me. And really what it was is that this now 53-year-old, oh, interesting. So that means that was like 40 years ago, if I can do quick math. That's nuts. Anyway, so this now 53-year-old looks back at that 13-year-old and what is the word I'm looking for? I guess my intentions are very clear to me now. And my hopes and desires in that moment are pretty clear to me now. And what it is that I, although I was still a virgin, I hadn't lost my virginity. My innocence had been gone for way longer than that, way longer than that. And we're going to get into that more in another podcast. But it's, oh my God, my heart breaks for that 13-year-old. Because really, I remember carrying around this V card, right? Like, I'm a virgin, I'm a virgin. And just having it feel and having it be this like weighted thing, this, like, ugh, I can't wait to just throw this away. Because if I were to do that, if I were to cash that check, so to speak, if I were to cash in that B card, so to speak, that would also, by proxy, mean that I chose that, at least in my mind, right? And so, really, for me, the virginity card wasn't like a losing of innocence or a stepping into maturity as much as it was I have this card in my hand that says I get to choose something, and I am so desperate for choice because choice had not previously been given to me as an even much younger child than that. And alongside wanting choice, I also wanted connection. I was taught very early on that connection came through my physical being. And there wasn't a lot of choice in that. What are the words I'm looking for? My value, that's where my value came in. It was valuable if I could please another human being. And so flash forward to this defining moment of, losing my virginity and having two people there at the time, and being like, well, whatever, I don't care. I just want to check this box. I just want to say that I chose. I just want to be valuable to, like, if I could be valuable to one person, being valuable to two people is like mother load, right? And it's such a sad thing to unpack, and it's such a sad state of being when you have a young child, who is acting out, potentially, maybe acting more sexualized than the human brain can conceptualize. Like, why are they that way? And I guess what that brings me to is the idea of being curious, like infusing curiosity into that why. Like when you're faced with a young person in your life, and having four children myself, I have many young people, or I've had many young people. They're all older than that now, but in my life, right? And what I try to do, and I'm not always perfect at it, is I try to come to behavior that I don't understand from a place of curiosity. Why are you acting that way? What happened to encourage you or to prompt you to act in that fashion? And so it's interesting. So there's a lot of roads that converge here. Again, episode 1, we talked about this situationship that I had gotten into. And it's very interesting to me as I've dug into the roots of that, and like, why did I let that happen? Like, without guilt or shame, without infusing guilt, like, why did I make that happen? No, it's like, why were my defenses down, or why, those aren't the right words that I'm looking for. Why was I open to that? What about that looked attractive to me? And I think one of the roots of it is tied into that part of me, that part of my younger me that was just seeking some sort of connection, some sort of being the object, so to speak, of somebody's desire, right? And as I started to unpack that a little bit, I was really met with this 13-year-old me, this me that has desired authentic connection, this me that has desired choice and voice in the things that I do, alongside being human. And, it feels good. It feels good to have somebody be attracted to you who you are also attracted to, right? Like, it's not lost on me that if there's somebody who's like pursuing you or pursuing me, whatever, and you're not attracted to them, that it can feel more of a nuisance than a turn on, right? You'd be like, ugh, leave me alone, right? But when there's somebody who's attractive and, you are the object of their affection, even just in a moment. Sorry, I'm trying to keep really good close proximity of attention to timing because I don't want to go too much, too over. Last week I think I was right at 40 minutes and I want to cut it back down. Anyway, so when you're on the receiving end, when I was on the receiving end of that attraction, one of the things that was triggered in me was that idea of this body, this attractiveness, this, ability to please, being the thing that had value in that moment, as opposed to standing in the integrity of my no. I am still learning all these years later. I'm 53 years old, like I said earlier. I'm still learning all of these years later, one, where my no exists, and two, how to stand in that from a place of grace, and not having to fight for it. Because I know how to fight. Like, that's sadly, I know how to fight. Didn't always win that fight, lost those fights a lot, but I know how to do it. And so, yeah, it brought me back to that place. And then it brought me to a place of considering, the vessel of me. Oh, I'm losing my words. Let me just give me a moment to collect my thoughts. Yeah, it brought me to a place where I could sit with that part of me and really do some deeper inner healing, where I could sit with that 13-year-old, in what I refer to, well, is referred to not just by me, in parts work, right? Where we invite that part of ourselves. And I invited that part of myself to me, to come to the surface, to have a whole ass conversation about, one, there's nothing to be ashamed of. We got no hope of a better past. For anyone who's still going, holy shit, did she just tell the whole world that she lost her virginity at 13 years old in a threesome? Yes, she did. Why? There's a lot of whys. The first and foremost of that why is because it happened. Nothing to be ashamed of there. I would probably change it if I could, because it wasn't particularly it wasn't like a, oh, yes, this is amazing experience. It was kind of like oh, so that's what choice feels like. Oh, right. The other why is that because I know, being a mother of 4 children, I know that as parents, as our children get into those teenage years where fucking hormones are raging and like they're just whatever, like their mouth is wild, they're pushing boundaries, all of these things. I know from firsthand experience that it can be a lot easier, for a lack of a better word, to just be angry about it. Stop acting that way. Stop doing that. Don't do that. Why are you acting that way? Why do you behave that way? Right? In whatever avenue it is. But what my 13-year-old self reminded me and would like to say to you, as any parents out there who are dealing with, you know, kids, young adults who might be acting out of what you think is appropriate character for that age. And instead of being punitive as our first line of defense, I invite you to get curious about that. Um, my parents, I don't perceive that they were curious. I also don't perceive that I was a particularly easy young adult to deal with. So let's just get really clear on that. We had a co-created shared experience of each other. So I'm not pointing fingers outwardly. And I don't remember, I guess I should say, them being particularly curious about some of my out of character for a normal 13-year-old or for an untraumatized 13-year-old, my behavior. And so, I definitely tried to get away with a lot, and I did, and I pushed a lot of boundaries. And it was in the search for the idea of choice, the idea that if I chose a thing, oh, this is such an interesting thing that's happening in my mind. It's if I chose something, if I chose just to say yes, then somehow that was a safe zone. But what I realized is that it's not just about choosing it, it's about being embodied enough to get consent from self first. Do I want to be doing this? And if I do want to be doing this and I choose yes, then wonderful. Um, but for many, many years, and certainly at 13, I didn't stop to consider what it meant to get consent from myself because I didn't know what that looked like or felt like. What I knew was what it looked like or felt like to have something taken from me. Even amongst like, all the of you're so amazing as a even younger person when somebody was taking that from me. So I invite, parents to get curious about their teenagers' behavior. I know it's super easy to get angry. And then for anyone who is hearing this and is like, holy shit, I also was super fucking young when I dove into that pool of sexuality. And yeah, I also, was somebody who didn't have choice prior to that. I invite you to sit with that part of you. Sit with that part of you and just ask that part of you, what do you need from me? What do you need from me in order to heal? There is an expression in the rooms of recovery that say we are only as sick as our secrets. And that's true for me. I can keep some shit real secret. And over the years, what I've been learning to do is to open that up so that I'm not sitting in secrets, so that I'm not hiding and all in the shadows, right? Because I don't want to be sick in that way anymore. And where I'm not, to be clear, where I'm not like celebrating that fact, I'm not standing on the mountaintop like, yeah, check me out, I got to fuck at 13. Like, not at all. But I'm holding that 13-year-old in me and going, wow, I'm so sorry that I put you in that position. And thank you for having the resilience. Thank you for having the resilience to allow me to get to this place in my life where I can feel more embodied. And when a situationship comes up and I act in a way that is not in alignment with who I am today and who I'm striving to be, that awareness and that healing and that love for my 13-year-old self and the love for the present day me helps me not beat the shit out of myself and, call myself all kinds of names because, again, no hope of a better past. It just was. And if I share it, my hope is that it helps someone. It helps somebody unpack, or bring out of the shadows something that they've been holding onto, some hot rock that's in their hand, like drop it on the ground. Or I hope that it can help somebody get curious. Like, why is this person in my life behaving in a way that is confusing to me? Especially as it surrounds like sex and sexuality and, hypersexuality, that type of thing, or even self-harm. I did a lot of that over the course of the years. But really, it's so funny because I really felt like my choice in losing my virginity or giving my virginity to the two people that I did it with, I felt like that was going to be this like super empowering thing, like like I was going to be my own Prince Charming, right? I was going to be my own hero in that moment, and I was going to say, I get to choose now. And what I realized, I mean, I'd have realized it way before today, but what I realized is that without consent from myself first, then anything that I potentially do, especially in the arena of, giving my body to someone else without my consent, that can be and has proven to be just as traumatizing to my overall being as someone else taking that from me without getting my consent. So it's not about blame or shame or guilt. I'm not carrying those things around it anymore. I just won't. It is about awareness, and it is about curiosity, and it is about being, I guess, expansive enough to love unconditionally, self first, right? And to be able to say the things like, yeah, I did that. I did that. For sure, I did that. Without like hiding your face, without me hiding my face, like, yeah, I did that thing and I'm so dirty and I'm so bad, because I'm not dirty or bad. I'm a human being who's been living a human experience. The children that we have in this world, your children, my children, they are human beings having a human experience. That's just the way of it. And whether we keep our head in the sand about the fact that as human beings, a vast majority of us are going to be sexual beings, there are beings who are not sexual at all, and that is totally beautiful, right? And it can be a result of a traumatic experience, or it can just be a result of who that person is organically. Either way, beautiful. And so I'm not, pointing fingers of like, that's weird, or that's, just because it's different. But what I'm saying is that as a majority of us being sexual beings, we don't have to frame ourselves out in such a way that we say, oh, I'm dirty because. No, no. And I guess ultimately, the message that I want to impart in this particular podcast, I guess it's twofold, is one, give yourself enough grace to get consent from yourself before you do anything, in that arena. If you're swiping on Tinder or you're fucking trying to spice things up with your partner, get consent from yourself first. And if you don't know what that looks like or feels like, maybe try to touch base with that part of you that desires that. And if you already know that you've experienced some sort of trauma in that arena, I'm going to encourage you. I'm not going to say you got to get on a podcast and like tell the world, like that's one of my avenues of healing. It doesn't have to be yours, but I do encourage you to tell someone. Don't keep it a secret. Tell somebody who can help you unpack it. Don't keep it a secret because my loves, you don't have to be a secret. You just don't. You get to be a secret. Sacred and secret are different. You're going to hear me say that a lot in these podcasts, but you do not have to be a secret. I don't care if that's, if your mother, brother, husband, wife, children, are all alive and could potentially be mortified by what comes out of your mouth. You don't have to be a secret. So please tell someone, let somebody help you unpack that. And then lastly, if you have a person in your life, whether they're a young person or whether they're an older person, whether they're a 53-year-old person, right, who is acting in such a way that is confusing, especially where it relates to sex and sexuality, I'm going to invite you to not vilify and instead get real curious and ask the question. Have the courage to ask the question, what happened to you? Do you know? Is this behavior in alignment with you? And do you know that I'm a safe place to talk about that without judgment? And if you're not a safe place to talk about it without judgment, fucking don't act like one, right? But curiosity goes a long way. Curiosity goes a fuck ton further than criticism or vilifying, making villain of someone. So I guess with that, I feel pretty complete with today's episode. There's so much more to unpack. My teenage years, my younger years, my parenting years. There's going to be a lot of episodes on my parenting years. I'm still a parent, but my younger parenting years. And I look forward to having you on this journey with me, the whole time, the whole way. And just know that, again, no matter what you're unpacking, no matter what you're healing from, no matter what life has thrown at you, no matter what your lived experience is in anything, my love, you do not have to be a secret. You are far too sacred for that. I love you. That's it for today.